with that in mind, let's get started. Welcome to our conference, the Security Challenge, our webinar, Security Challenges in Developing New Testing Programs, a coffee and conversation featuring Josephine Elizaga and Jamie Mulkey. Today's format is, as the title suggests, coffee and conversation. So if you would like to just pull up your favorite daytime appropriate beverage and join us as Josephine and Jamie discuss the challenges they've encountered in developing new testing programs. And we'll begin with Josephine, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hello and good morning. Good morning, Jamie, and good morning to everyone on the webinar today. My name is Josephine Elizaga, and I will start from the last bullet. I am Senior Manager for Certification for Genesis. Genesis is a contact center solutions leader, and to give an example of what those words mean, if you have had contact or if you have called, emailed, or chatted with a few of the following North American companies like Overstock.com, Walgreens, American Airlines, Verizon, Blue Cross, Michigan.gov, or the United States Postal Office, chances are you use the Genesis framework in order to interact with customer support for these companies. We are a leader with over 4,500 corporate clients worldwide. I have over 20 years of experience, mainly in the software training industry. And for 15 years, I was part of HP Software Education, where I worked in training and certification. And it is there where I learned, I was fortunate enough to learn a lot from the experts running the prestigious HP Expert One program. So I hope to be able to share some of that experience with you today. Jamie?
Hi, this is Jamie Mulkey, and I am the Vice President of Client Services for Caveon. I've been with Caveon for about 7.5 years, and like Josephine, I've been in the testing and certification industry for about 20 years, both managing, developing certification programs, as well as consulting with different testing organizations. I'm also currently the Executive Director for the CESP certification program, and that is the up-and-coming Certified Exam Security Professional program. So with that, what we'd like to do today is get a sense of who we have on our call today. We'll start our first poll question. And the question is, are you in the process of developing a new certification program? So the poll is open right now. You can go ahead and vote, and then we'll gather our statistics when the voting is complete.
Okay, Jamie, we'll give people just a couple more minutes to vote. We have about 60% that have voted so far. So just go ahead and click your screen if you'd like to vote. We'll give you about 10 more seconds to do so. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and we have the majority of people have voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results.
What's the difference between a director and an executive director?
So it looks like we have a few people that, a few individuals that are just starting a new program, and it looks like the majority of folks are just looking for some new ideas in terms of test security that they can bring into their program. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide and talk about our agenda for the day. Really what we want to achieve through this coffee and conversation is security in terms of developing your program as well as developing your exams. What are some of the resources that you can use? And also a really important topic is how do you talk to your management about test security and its importance? How do you get buy-in? So we're going to start our conversation with Josephine today. And Josephine, as we get started here, before we actually start to talk about test security specifically, can you tell us a little bit about your exam development life cycle that you've been using?
Sure. It's on the next slide. And I have to tell everyone that my background is originally engineering, followed by instructional design. So cycle, the exam development cycle that I've conjured in my mind is a combination of the ADDIE model and the software development life cycle. And you will see planning and analysis, design, development, review, implementation, and evaluation. And underneath each of them are sort of the end results or the main activities that I normally go through. So under planning and analysis, the business plan includes the minimally qualified candidate profile, along with the training and certification path. And in components in place, I refer to resources, guidelines, policies, and infrastructure as items that should be in place before the rest of the project continues. And you will see more details of that on the next slide. But going back to some of the elements under each of the phases, under the design phase, what I end up with is of exam topics that the project will cover, along with an outline of the exam, a draft of the exam that will be sent out to reviewers. During the development phase, exam items are completed, and it goes through several rounds of review. Once exam items have been uploaded and available online in its production stage, it goes through some sort of beta testing to gather initial feedback. And the circles represent minor tweaks in the content for launch. And finally, during the evaluation stage, once the exam is in full public availability mode, and there has been enough volume of test takers to gather or to look at results and public feedback, there might be another round of cycle of tweaking and editing and improving the content. So that is my exam development cycle. And the question would be, when do I start thinking about security? And I think we could move to the next slide.
Right. So that was going to be my next question for you. How do you plug security, test security, into this life cycle?
It's in every single phase, and you will see on the left side I had placed components in. I had made components in place in bold font because the items listed under each of the other phases sort of I want them ready and in place during the planning. So what do I think about? Or what do I use? Non-disclosure agreements for exam writers and exam reviewers. Some sort of system to gather and distribute input from the developers and also from the ones reviewing the content of the exam. An infrastructure to house the exam bank. Possibly with the ability to limit access to exam writers so that there's no one person who has the ability to see the entire bank in one.
Not just twat. That's what Nini says.
There is a person speaking who might need to be on mute.
Everyone, if you're not speaking right now, please go ahead and mute your phones. It looks like we have all attendees muted, so I don't think it's an attendee. I'm not sure where we're picking up that noise, but if you all double check that you're muted. Thank you.
All right. The other items include the candidate agreement for when the exam is online. And then finally, during the evaluation stage, we monitor exam activity, and that can include monitoring community channels, searching for brain dump sites, and looking at exam results.
This is great. Really useful job aid. It's really nice, really nicely laid out. So let's go and decide, what else have you established that can be added in terms of test security to your program?
Let's go to the next slide. So the information I have on the previous slide, I sort of organized it under policies, guidelines, and infrastructure. So we listed the NDA, agreements, the cheating policy. I have item writing guidelines, even have file naming guidelines and file distribution. I mean, in terms of, you would be surprised with file naming guidelines, because when you look at brain dump sites, you will see copies of old tests might have a different spelling, so you know that, so you are able to determine if that is something from your file or something that has been compiled without your permission. Also, finally, infrastructure, technology, and organizational. I have set up, well, I have worked with an exam development and delivery system. I also have applications and systems for exam review. That includes NGOF forms, relationships for psychometric review services and forms filled. And I also form relationships with legal, marketing, customer support, and web organizations. Now, of all these, admittedly, I have the least experience on composing candidate agreements and the cheating policy, because the programs I've joined have them established already. So I was wondering, Jamie, do you have any thoughts on candidate agreements and their importance?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let's. Yeah, great. You're already on the next slide. So, you know, the whole thing about a well-crafted candidate agreement is that it really defines the relationship between the test taker and the testing organization. It's a binding contract, so it gives both the test taker rights as well as the program rights, and it means responsibilities for both the parties. And finally, it acknowledges any remedies that may be needed should there be like any type of a breach that happens. We say that it's memorialized because we're going to put this thing in writing, and that allows us, actually both parties, to really know what's expected of them. And then lastly, just making sure that the expectations and remedies are clear. So for example, if you state in your candidate agreement that you're going to use statistical analyses to detect testing irregularities, then that gives you the right to be able to use that functionality or to use statistics to detect irregularities and to make decisions about score invalidation based on those statistical analyses that you're doing. So it really makes any of the actions that you have stipulated in this agreement actionable and enforceable. So with that, let's go to our next poll question. And the question is, which of the following do you have in place for your testing program? So Rochelle's going to go ahead and turn on the poll, and we want to know, do you have candidate policies and agreements in place? Guidelines for item development and distribution, secure exam development, and possible exam exposure, and relationships with legal, marketing, and customer support. And this is all that apply. So we'll kind of see what people have in place.
Okay, people are voting. We'll give you guys just a couple more minutes to finish voting. We have about 50% that have voted so far. Some more background noise there. Sorry about that, guys. Go ahead and select all that apply to your program. And we're at about 70%. Let's get those votes in. Okay, looks like we've got the majority of people that have voted, so I'll go ahead and share those results with you now.
Okay, so it looks like the majority of the group have policies and agreements in place, guidelines for item development, secure exam development, and maybe a little bit fewer folks in the group have web monitoring and the relationships with legal, marketing, customer support. So, that's interesting. Speaking of relationships, it really ties nicely into our next slide. Josephine, I wanted to ask you, how do you talk with your management about test security?
It depends on the level of management, and it's on the next, oh, there it is. So I have been fortunate that the education managers I've worked for understood the value of certification and the risks involved in developing an exam. So the conversation at the education management level is on exam validity, on making sure that test results are valid because the IP is secure, and that you're really able to, candidates who actually have the skills and knowledge who are certified, and not because they pass the exam because they have a copy of the answers. However, there is also some sort of exchange of business-centric information involved. I keep in mind that I have to provide information on resources used and investments made versus the success of an exam in terms of volume, in terms of pass-fail ratio, and in terms of was there, in the industry I belong, education and training can fall under a P&L. So I am cognizant of the fact that I have to provide some sort of summary information that the investments made were returned back. With other organizations like marketing and legal, so I've found, so most corporate forums or webs or blogs fit under marketing or the web team. So I've learned to seek their help in terms of keeping an eye out for people asking for tips or asking how to quote-unquote better prepare, and or if you have a set of review questions available, and that's sort of a discussion I have with them. With legal, it's more of asking help for legal documents, candidate agreements, non-disclosure agreements, even the treating policies. The opportunities I've had to speak with executive management about certification, I don't discuss, degrees of difficulty or weak distractors. The level of discussion is more on how certification can help the business and what resources are needed to make it happen. And test security would be included underneath that conversation. So these are, based on my experience, these are the 3 levels or 3 different groups of management that I've had contact with in terms of certification, Jamie.
That's great. And I can imagine that we'll go to the next slide here, that being an individual kind of being responsible for a testing program, it must be kind of difficult to secure resources that you need to get all the work done that you need to do for in terms of test security. So can you speak a little bit about that, like in terms of how you monitor the lab?
Does it sound like I've been doing all the work myself?
It does.
Well, I'm a one-person team right now, but I know when to seek help, and there are, for brain dump sites, for example, I monitor that myself, but for customer, forums, corporate forums, blog sites, as I mentioned, I seek the help of other departments, and it's a matter of asking, hey, can you check if you ever see anyone asking for tips on exams or sharing a question or getting, having feedback on an item that looks like it was part of an exam, can you send that over to my, to me? That way I'm not looking at many different things at the same time, and since it's already part of what they do with these community channels, I seek their help on it. But that's just one thing, Jamie. What about, what are the mechanisms used today to detect cheating? I mean, web monitoring is one thing. Do you have other? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about a couple of things you can use to detect cheating. The first, is, as Josephine mentioned, is web monitoring, and it's really a matter of checking chat rooms, brain dump sites, social media forums, anything where there's going to be some chatter about you're doing the searching. You're not only looking for exact exam titles, maybe looking at nuances or purposefully misspelled exam titles to help things that you might not search for in understanding that people are exposing your test content. So the other thing would be statistical analyses. And this can be, if you're a new program, this can be something as simple as setting some of your own thresholds to help you make policy decisions. And just as an example, let's say that you know that on average it takes your candidates, your test takers, about 45 minutes to take your exam. But you are seeing people who are just speed demons and they are completely high score. So if you set that threshold to say, take this exam under 20 minutes and gets a 95% or above, we're going to invalidate the score. The results just look too suspicious to us and this can't be trusted. And so it's a matter of writing that information down, making sure that you've memorialized it and using it consistently so that you can make those policy decisions and help keep out those people who should not successfully pass the test.
I've seen that, by the way, Jamie, what you just described.
Oh, yeah, give us an example.
Yeah, because there was, normally I take a look at the exam scores because I note the test takers who score 90 and above, because in my head I'm thinking I can invite them for future beta tests of future versions. And I see someone with a score of 95, and I was ready to put his name down, and I took a look at the time start and the time end, and it was what, 19, 20 minutes, and I'm thinking that could be right. He finished a 100-item test in less than 20 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah. So sometimes you won't believe it until you see it, and I did see something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great example. All right, you guys, let's go to our next poll question here. And the question is, what are some of the issues you've seen when starting a new testing program? Are there, do you find issues with budget in terms of, lack of budget for test security, a lack of buy-in? They don't understand, about the dangers of test security, or just a lack of resources in terms of people to help you manage those test security issues. So this isn't all that apply. And let's go ahead. I think Rochelle's got the poll open.
Yep, and people are actively voting. We'll give you a couple more minutes to vote. You can select more than one if you'd like. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Got a couple last votes coming in. Okay, well, we're close to 100%, so I'll go ahead and share the results with you.
Oh, great. Okay. So it looks like really the greatest amount here is really lack of resources to help with your test security issues. So that's really interesting. It's not so much of a budget issue, maybe in some instances, or a lack of buy-in, but really just the resources to help. Oh, okay. Very interesting. Well, let's go to our next slide now.
Hey, Jamie, it looks like you do have a question in the question box. I don't know if you can see that. I can read that to you. If not, it might be a good time to answer that.
Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Why don't you go ahead and read it to me, because I'm
Sure. So the question is, What do you mean by guidelines for item development and distribution? I have policy on the style of the item and the distribution is limited to only those who manage the program.
That is what I meant.
Yeah, I think it's, setting up some rules about who's going to have access to your tests and how they'll be, how they'll be distributed, what your exam development process is going to be like, just memorializing that stuff so that you have a consistent process and it's a secure process. So I hope that answers the question. So
Jamie, we can't hear you. I don't know if you're speaking.
Yes.
oh, can you hear me now?
Ask, what test security advice do you have for
the
testing program manager?
Well, you know me, I'm full of it, so I'll give you my 2 cents. Really, the first thing is doing some planning in and around security incidences. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, but really don't wait until you have a test security issue before you start thinking about protecting your intellectual property. And by way of a short, quick story, we have a colleague, John Freemer, and his father was a firefighter. And what he used to say was that planning an exit strategy or an exit route during a fire is not during the fire, but before that fire occurs. Have a plan in place. And really, the same is true with test security. You need to have a plan in place when something happens. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And as Josephine just attested to, really, establishing those relationships with folks that are in legal and marketing and supporting your company. As we state here, you could be a one-person program, but hopefully you can utilize some of those resources that have expertise that can help you from a test security perspective. Josephine, can you think of anything else?
I think I would go back to providing management with information that shows positive results and investments made to the program. That way certification remains in the conversation.
Right, right. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to give you a hypothetical here. So, Josephine, if you have a budget for just one test security feature, what would it be?
Okay, I have 4 options. Let me think. And I might sound like I'm talking, just blabbering here, but be patient. So a good exam delivery vendor, depending on my situation, if I were like a smaller, medium-sized program, I would want an exam delivery vendor that provided development platforms as well as administration features that could limit users. And the ability to edit and republish exams at minimal cost. A good cheating policy, I could get that free with the help of legal. Third-party web monitoring service. If I were a large large testing program, and I have some exams are really popular and people are flocking to it and trying to take it, and there's a higher risk of people wanting to get certified and doing whatever it takes to get certified, I would probably pick a third-party web monitoring service. More items. If I play it right, I could ask subject matter experts to write more items for me. I would pick, for my situation, a good exam delivery vendor.
Okay. Okay.
And that way my forms are in one location and development could occur, could edit, we could develop there. However, when you mentioned preserving exam, I mentioned preserving exam forms in banks. Are there other technologies out there, Jamie, that's going on to help further address this issue? Do you know?
Yeah, why don't we segue to the next slide, and I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing for this new Certified Exam Security Professional program. So in terms of the design of the program, we've really designed it with security in mind. We've looked at, the number of items that we're developing as well as the number of forms so that we make sure that we can limit exam exposure. The other thing is that we're using a new item type. And this is called discrete option multiple choice, and it is a way of, I'll call it a way of minimizing the exposure of an item and minimizing the exposure of distractors and correct responses. So I'll show an example of this on the next slide. So we're using DOMC throughout the exam. Also, when we looked at the resources for developing our items, we determined that we wanted to keep that in-house. So many programs a lot of times will bring in external subject matter experts to help write items. We decided that since we have enough expertise inside of Caveon to write the items for this exam, we would keep that internal, thereby also, minimizing the exposure. A couple of unique things that we're doing in terms of registration and test administration. In terms of registration, we are going to be gathering a whole lot of information about each candidate. And so we will really know who that candidate is that is coming to take our exam. And not unlike the TSA pre-check that travelers can now sign up for and register for so that they streamline their process through the security lines at airports, that's kind of what we're looking at. Just really knowing a whole lot about this candidate so we really know who they are prior to taking the exam, and thereby reducing the risk that they are there to steal exam items. And lastly, from a test administration standpoint, we will be delivering our exams online using online proctoring. So we just feel that that's a better methodology to use, and we can manage the test administration process better. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll give you an example of a discrete option multiple choice item. So this item is taken from the site trydomc.com. So you can go out there because there's lots of examples of discrete option multiple choice items. And this item happens to be on mule deer facts. So we see the question here in the top left, how long does it take for the spots of a newborn mule deer to disappear? But the distinction that you'll see with discrete option is that you only see one option, and you have to answer yes or no. Now, if we move over to the right side of the screen, this is the kind of the inner workings of the item itself. It tells us that we've got one correct response and 4 incorrect responses. That the presentation said, again, is 1 correct, 4 incorrect. But it also tells you what it will take to get the item right and what it will take to get the item wrong. So if I'm presented with one distractor and I get that, it just goes away. So I've just protected the exposure of my distractors, of the remaining distractors, to the individual if they've already answered the question wrong.
That is interesting. So at what phase is this program? Is it on production phase already?
We are working to have it out by the beginning of 2015. So we're working on it right now.
Okay.
And we'll have it out.
That's good to know. So in the event, for example, that the unthinkable happens, and DOMC is not yet in place, and I mentioned that crafting a test security incident response is something I have limited experience with. What could be, what could help me out in creating a response plan?
Yeah.
For example, you find out that one exam is now being sold for $79.99 over testking.com.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, and I'll illustrate with a story, and then we'll go to Josephine's example. So, you know, really when we talk about, why don't we go to the next slide, really when we talk about a security incident response plan, it's understanding what are the types of incidents, security incidents that might occur, and what will you do in response to that incident. So it's who will you contact, what are the sanctions that will happen depending on the type of incident, how will you respond, who are you going to communicate to, and what will you communicate to stakeholders when the issue has been resolved. So in the case that Josephine stated, I've gone out, I've found my exam, and darn it, they are selling it for $79 out on a brain dump site. And so I would want to have a plan in place that when that situation does occur, I'm going to do something like notify my legal department so a cease and desist letter can be sent to them. I'm going to look at and verify that the items that are out there are truly my exam items. And if they are, I'm going to work on a plan to replace those items with maybe a reserve bank that I might have. So all those things that go along with and that way you're thinking about this ahead of time. You know that if this is to occur, here's my action plan. And again, it's to get you to think ahead about responding to a crisis when you're not in the crisis. And again, it's really having a remedy and a plan so that you can minimize damage. And I think also, lastly, I'll say that from a consistency standpoint, you can handle similar types of issues the same way. Okay, well,
you saved the best for last. In my situation, I like this slide a lot.
Oh, good, good. Well, why don't we go to the next slide? It looks like we are out of coffee here, but we hope the conversation has been helpful for you today. And you know, we talked about we're making sure that you integrate test security into your exam development life cycle, as well as the program, making sure that you're putting processes and policies in place. Josephine mentioned making sure you're talking with management about the importance of test security and maximizing your security dollars as a new program. So what we'd like to do now is move to the next slide and just open it up for any questions that you have. And I'll bring up the question box and see what we've got here. So any questions that you guys might have, you can go ahead and type them into the question box and we will answer them. I know another person had a question about how do you detect brain dumping? How do you detect brain dump sites? Josephine, you want to field that one?
I search for my exam. I Google my exams. It sounds silly, I know. It's like Googling your own name, but I have to find out if there are people talking about it or posting information about it. Mostly it's under the cover of review practice test or review materials.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Jamie? What about you, Jamie?
It looks like we have another question. Could you please elaborate on resource usage considerations? So I guess, and Josephine, you can help me chime in here, but just looking to those other departments within your organization that can help you with security tasks. So Josephine talked about utilizing some of her, like her customer service reps, going over and talking to that, you know, there's test content out there. Can you let me know?
And in terms of the project, Jamie, are you still speaking?
I'm not.
Okay, in terms of the of the exam project itself, in my situation, I'm only able to use subject matter experts. There are other exam development projects that use both an instructional designer and a subject matter expert working hand in hand. So in terms of resources, I have the project manager, the subject matter experts. I do have psychometric services included, and then utilizing other departments, help from other departments or other organizations such as legal, the web team, and customer support for monitoring.
Great. Another question came in. Are there any particular search parameters that you use when searching for online brain dump sites, aside from just the name of the exam? One of the things I mentioned earlier was, searching on similar names to your exam. Some individuals will purposely put an X in the middle of the exam title to help throw off your searching capabilities. You can also search on maybe taking a phrase from one of your questions or a few of your questions. Josephine, anything else to add to that?
There's someone who responded on the chat of just searching for brain dump sites. Exam review or exam practice test, and then the name. I would get a result from those as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it looks like we are out of questions. I don't see any more coming through. But if you decide that you do have a question afterwards, please go ahead and email us, and we'll make sure to get a response out to you. As Patrick mentioned earlier, we'll be getting both the recording of this webinar as well as the slides out to all the folks who attended today, as well as those who weren't able to attend but did register. So let's go to our last slide, and you can get both my contact as well as Josephine's contact information. Josephine, any last parting thoughts?
Only that this was a nice experience, and I hope I was able to provide slivers of ideas to those attending the webinar. And it's always nice to speak with you, Jamie. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, you too. Thank you. Enjoyed having coffee with you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.